Hi, I'm Meg Martin. I'm the Executive Director for Interfaith Works. Welcome to Lean in Olympia. Lean in Olympia is a bi-weekly show that Interfaith Works hosts here at Porcupine Media Studios. And we talk about conversations around justice, humanity, belief, things happening in our community, amazing leaders, different organizations. And I'm super excited today because we're doing things a little bit differently. I wasn't able to secure a guest, and so you might notice that I'm sitting in the hot seat today, usually where my guests are. And I'm being joined by Miguel from, are you the CEO, would you say? Or what's your
co-founder
title? Co-founder.
And Director of Operations here at Porcupine Media.
Yeah. And so Miguel, I was like, hey guys, I'm not going to be able to make it today. Couldn't get a guest for Lean in Olympia. And Miguel's like, what if I interviewed you? And we were just talking that I was almost like, no. And then I said yes.
All of Olympia wants to know.
So Miguel, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
And I'm stoked to hang out.
Well, yeah, I was, obviously this morning I was like feeling really inspired. And I think, as I was writing my email response, I was reflecting on, we've been doing this program and helping produce this program with you for almost 2 years.
Yep.
And it's like the time is just like, seems like we started the podcast, the show, the live stream, just like last week or something.
Yeah.
It feels so fresh and so new. And, I'm just like wanted to take the opportunity to get your experience in the process and where you found comfort, where you found growth and discomfort and all those types of layers in this. And, I was hoping that you could share just sort of a brief overview of what your experience has been like being a part of this show.
Yeah, definitely. Well, while you were talking, I was trying to think, why did you approach us originally? Or did...
It's hard to say.
We needed like a event filmed or something.
I think Interfaith Works found us on Tinder or something like that.
Yeah. Swiped right.
Yes.
Yeah. So I forget exactly how it came up, but then we had sort of a coordination meeting, and I remember I had this very narrow thing that I thought we were going to be talking about, and then you were like, but what if we did this whole other thing? And I feel like years ago, you had been doing some kind of photography and media stuff for other nonprofits. And I've always been kind of prickly, Porcupine Media, prickly about the way that nonprofits do marketing and like do fundraising, particularly around, there's a lot of exploitation often of like the people that are served and using people's stories to raise money for nonprofits. And I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about it. And so when we first started talking about like what could marketing look like for Interfaith Works, I think I was pretty like resistant to a lot of the ideas that were being up. And you had pitched this idea, because it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, of doing this show and possibly having a host and doing interviews in the community. And I think that me and Corey were like deer in the headlights. I would love to hear what that was like for you.
It was beautiful, because I was like, you guys we're pretty much scared shitless of the concept of trying to talk for more than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, I remember one of the things that I said, I was like, in 6 months, in 3 months, you're going to be at a point where we won't be able to shut you up.
Yeah.
Because you'll find your space. And I'm so glad I was right about that.
Yeah.
And I think that like, just kind of thinking back to that moment and seeing where Lean in Olympia is gone, the range of guests has been beautiful. And even when we couldn't have everybody in the same room, it was a very adaptable program. And the folks that you and Corey have brought on really are, change makers in our community and beyond, in interfaith relations and homeless services.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff that's blended between those two things.
Yeah.
And so just thinking about the original thing, I just think it's kind of beautiful that people, once they use this tool, it then just becomes like first nature, just like just conversation. And one of the things that I really wanted in speaking about marketing for nonprofits, I had a big problem with the way that nonprofits exploit people that they serve. Mm-hmm. And so how do we reclaim that in a way where we're still talking about the issues? And I just appreciate learning from you and Corey about how we do that, how we share story, how we share space, who we bring in, and who is kind of like not really included. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so, I've had quite a, I'm just so proud of the two of you. So just from that sort of gut level, I think it's been really beautiful to watch your program grow.
Yeah. And I remember like at first there were so many questions that we were like, but what do you mean like at the time it was like, what even is a podcast, or how do we do, like, what do you mean it's a live show on Facebook, or like, what does that even mean? And I think that I am often in the community talking about topics that are really hard to talk about, that make people uncomfortable, that bring up a lot of feelings, and I'm like trying to encourage people to go into those spaces a lot, and trying to encourage myself to go into those spaces a lot, even when it feels scary. And I feel like you reflected that back to like me and to us about like, what if you could get the word out about what you're doing, about what other people are doing, in a way that maybe feels uncomfortable to me at the time. But it's been really cool to have this like tool in the toolbox of not only the Lean In show, but also the produced pieces, and like thinking about how do we as a community like get the messages that we get. And I hear so often that people are like, either I don't know that there's all this work happening on issues of justice or homelessness or poverty or kids in schools or like whatever. Either I don't know that it's happening, or there seems to be so much of it happening that I am like overwhelmed and I can't sort through it.
Yeah.
And so I think that nonprofits and other community groups and organizations finding ways to like talk about our messages and what we're doing and the work we're doing and lift each other up is going to help our community better understand what all the issues are and what the work's. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember one of the initial conversations, and I made a suggestion about wouldn't it be great to be able to be the people that the community turns to as leading the conversations of change.
Yeah.
Like, instead of waiting for a camp to be eradicated over here, or, you know, what's going on in the broader community around houselessness or, harm reduction and all of those things, how do you be leaders in the conversation? And I personally respect you as somebody who's been a thought leader in our community.
Thanks.
This is my personal side, is like when I saw you give that TEDx talk, I was like, that's somebody I want to work with. That's somebody that's willing to step into discomfort and, create a space where others may have those conversations. And I think that's really the spirit of this program is, I think about one of my favorite shows was when you sat with Sam. It was beautiful because this program, as you all have made it, has been, what's the word? It's been very transformative, for our crew and, what I hear people talking about the program. I'm curious to know, what is the biggest thing that you've learned about yourself in doing this program and doing the Lean in Olympia?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that one of the main things that I've learned about myself is I'm like, how to not make this go down like a wild rabbit hole. But I think that during the pandemic, it's been really hard to maintain like all the anchors that we have in our lives for like why we are who we are or why we do what we do. Like, you know, for me, I have been like less able to see my family regularly because they live far away, or just sort of these things that are like what has brought me to where I am today. It's been hard to maintain those connections. And so I feel like Lean in Olympia helped me to reconnect with the anchor, even with people who I was interviewing who maybe I didn't know as well. Or, you know, like Sam and I have known each other a really long time. And so that interview was super easy to like drop into a deeper place of connection. And I think that I have learned that even like all the things that I thought were key anchors in my life that kind of went away during the pandemic, that there is still other places to find those connections and other places to maintain in our community. So I think that that like allowed me to see that my support network for not only myself, but also like for drawing inspiration and drawing hope and drawing, you know, belief that the world can be a better and different place. Those tendrils are like so much further than I thought they were. And and that's not to say that we don't, you know, in Olympia have a significant amount of like work to do and healing to happen. But I do think that this show has helped me really see like just how many badass, inspirational change makers there are. And I feel like you all are really helping to lift up those voices in such a cool and different way than's ever happened before. So
I'm also curious, you know, when we started this, there was the joke kind of like, we have to talk for more than 20 minutes. Like, how are we going to do that? How, you know, this is one observation that I have. How are you feeling when you started, and how are you feeling now? Like what has transformed in your sort of lens of this program?
I think that the comfort, or just like the fishbowl aspect of like the cameras and stuff, I think really freaked me out at first of like, I don't know who the audience is, or I don't know who's watching. And I think part of that is, I've realized like, I joke about this a lot, but I think that there's an element of realness to it, that it's like PTSD from when we were trying to open the shelter, and that there was a lot of like community conversations. I joked the other day of like, I'm glad I can call it that now. But when we were, you know, originally trying to open the first low barrier shelter in Olympia, like it was a hostile situation in a lot of ways. We had huge community meetings with like people legit saying things like that I would be like responsible for the rape of their children if we were to open this shelter, or that there was going to be like extreme harm that was like caused by us opening our program. And I think that over time like led me to a place of feeling like I had to be really careful with the way that I talked about everything and talked about hard stuff. And I kind of saw myself editing a lot of like, you know, like minimizing the realities of what was going on, editing a lot. And I think that what this has done for me is be like, I guess we can just kind of have real conversations. We can talk about these things. I'm less like aware or driven by fear of like who might be listening and what they might do with that information, and more like, this is just what we need to be talking about in the community. And I don't have to maybe edit as much as I thought that I did or I've had to in the past. Because when I look at what's really going on, we've made so much progress towards a lot of the messages we were sharing at that time. And so like the train is moving, you know? So I think that there's something there of like, this has helped me to know that we still have to have the hard conversations, even if people get upset, even if it doesn't resonate with every single person.
I imagine that in the midst of doing this work, there are things that people have said, good, bad, indifferent. What is something that you've heard somebody say about this program, or what has somebody shared with you about this program that maybe that you did not expect?
I think that there have been a couple of episodes that, at least I'll speak for myself. I know for Corey's episodes and Corey's feedback, it's probably different. But the episodes that I've received the most feedback on are the one with Sam Miller, the one with Marvin Bennett, who was a former shelter guest who now lives at in his own permanent housing. And he and I talked a lot about just kind of his trajectory through his story of homelessness. And then the more recent interview with 3 Unity Commons residents and their same story. And so what that tells me is just that there is so much community narrative that is filled in with assumptions, beliefs, biases, people witnessing things and just filling in the blanks. And there was this one person who used to be in downtown. I'm sure I've talked about them on this before, but they had a sign in their van that said, "Don't judge my entire life based on the chapter that you dropped in on." And I think that those moments in the show where it's like, oh, like this person who's this complete person, like Sam, for example, like this person who's this complete person who's like on the edge of breaking into like, you know, being a professional comedian in a mainstream way, was also sleeping in a doorway in downtown Olympia, and like people walked over him under a tarp, you know? And like, oh, that both of those things can be true at the same time. And I think that those have been the moments in this show that have been most like impactful for the community.
I think there's been, I think a good sign of health is frequent amounts of belly laughter.
Uh-huh.
What is one of the funniest memories that you have being on this program that just kind of makes you giggle? If you could share a little bit.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, of course, Sam comes to mind immediately because he's so funny. And I feel like in that show, we did a thing at a couple different points where it went from like full cracking up, like have to move away from the mic because we're laughing so hard, to like tears immediately of like, no, but seriously, like what was escaping addiction like for you, you know? And we were able to like really go between those emotions so much. So that immediately comes to mind. I think also one that comes to mind is when we were talking with the Unity Commons folks, and they went on this whole thing about how people call it camping, like, you know,
yes,
and they're
yeah, he was talking about like, I hate camping. You know, I did that for like 15 years. Like, why would I want to go out and do it again? I have a nice.
Why would anyone go camping? And they were like, yeah, why do we call people living outside camping? Like, it's different. Like, and I just had this picture of like all these like folks who are experiencing homelessness in like the best REI gear with like whatever, like headlight. I was just like, oh, it is so funny how like off we are about the perceptions that we have, and how we like do these mental gymnastics to try to make it. It's like, oh, people are just camping.
They're just
like
sleeping outside.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, wow. That was just a very like both hilarious and very profound moment, I feel like.
How are you feeling inspired to grow this program? Where does your heart lie in expanding this program? I'm curious.
Well, I think it's cool that we have been doing it, releasing it as a podcast too, because that was that's like another lesson of just like what's worked and what could be improved, is that I did get feedback from folks along the way that were like, I really want to listen, but I'm not going to like watch a YouTube video, or I don't really go on Facebook or whatever. And so that's been really cool to adapt it into having it be on the podcast also. Plus, shout out to Corey for writing our podcast intro music. Yeah, check it out, Corey, who's on tour right now.
Yeah,
with his band, playing shows, doing awesome. So I think that that's cool, like just evolving it to be like, how could we, and like at our last meeting, we talked about, how do we figure out who's actually listening to it and what the analytics look like and how can we get a further reach? Mm-hmm. And so learning, I think, a little bit more about that. Mm-hmm. I also have been thinking about how to use the produced pieces maybe a little bit differently that we do with you all, mm-hmm. and thinking about commercials and like what does it mean for nonprofits like in the commercial mm-hmm. zone. And so I was thinking about how like Dank's Wonder Emporium has like commercials on YouTube and stuff, and I was like, why don't we like do a like staff recruitment mm-hmm. commercial that we could like play on YouTube for the same people who are like seeing the Dank's Wonder Emporium messages, mm-hmm. who might not like be tied into this sort of like activist nonprofit world. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
So more advertisements, and I feel like maybe you might have not have been comfortable with that like almost 2 years ago.
No, hell no. No way. I would have been like, what are you talking about? No way. That's like, why would we do that? I don't know. It's like, and maybe I'm like kind of having this like realization as we're talking. I'm like, maybe it's because of this process that we've gone through, mm-hmm. but I've really started thinking about like, what do social justice movements in our communities look like, and who's involved and who's not, and what does it really mean to have widespread impact to like truly shift the mm-hmm. way that policies are made, the way that people talk about different issues. And I'm like, we have to reach further than, I mean, for Interfaith Works, it's like a history of punk activists who are all in a million bands that want to work here because I played in bands, and I'm like, sure, go on tour, whatever. But it's like, we need to get beyond that if we're really talking about diversity, if we're really talking about inclusion and like wider spread social change. It's like the spectrum has to get broader of who's part of that. And so I think that some of the, like, this is a really cool tool to like broaden that spectrum. Mm. I don't know if you see it that way at all, but
I see. What I love about this program is that it's an example for people in your realm to think of unconventional approaches. Like here in what we do, we never want to do anything in the middle. I want people to either hate our product mm-hmm. or be so passionately in love.
Yeah.
The middle is nowhere that I want to be. And a big part of it, and this is me kind of bearing my soul, is like, I see you all being a proactive nonprofit, right? Mm-hmm. In all ways, shapes, and forms. I'm curious to know what advice that you have for other nonprofits considering, or just anyone considering this tool.
Yeah. Well, I would say that it's really worth it. Like, I think that was another thing I said early on, was that I was like, what's the outcome basically? Or what would be the like benefit that makes it worth? Because especially at that time, thinking about $1,200 a month or whatever, $900 a month or whatever it was to start, like that was something that was like a major consideration for us of like, what are we investing in? And especially coming from the nonprofit world, you're like, every dollar to the services or every dollar to the front line. And like, and I have a lot of, thoughts and feelings about why that's not healthy or sustainable at all. But it's like, this was a major consideration for us. Like, are we going to spend our precious resources on marketing our program in this way? And it really has been worth it. And so I think that I really long for a nonprofit existence that is thriving and not surviving, that is like as funded as all of us deserve to be, that is like allowing us to have the space to like have creative moments, to have brainstorming moments, to have the room to just like imagine like what could things be like, rather than constantly reacting, responding, keeping head above water. And so I think that this, for me, at least as the director, I was like, this is a conscious decision towards a place of like thriving, and a conscious decision towards like, choices and actions towards sustainability, rather than like, well, no, we couldn't do that. Or, like I talk about like leading with yes instead of no when we're working with the folks we work with. And I think that was like a moment for me organizationally where it was like, I could be like leading with no with this, or I could lean in and try and just like see what happens and see what came out of it. And I was prepared to be like, we're not going to continue our contract after 6 months if this is like not worth it. And it's been totally worth it.
So as I'm listening to you, you talked about personal growth of the organization, growth of awareness.
Yep.
For a relatively minimal startup, right?
Yeah.
Which everyone listening, it's much more than that. So get in line.
Yeah.
But
we were the test pilot.
Yeah. But that, what's beautiful about this is you guys all, by choosing to do this program, you have allowed our company to really understand this process. And I think that like just reflecting, I think the thing that I'm most passionate about this program is that it has allowed people from very mixed backgrounds to come together on the level, which is like beautiful for me to see as an entrepreneur, a filmmaker, a community member, a board member, like this it informs all of these things. How has this program informed how you walk and carry yourself, versus before the program?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that immediately comes to mind is just that I, for many years, have been very like, our work is that it's like, our work is like responding to chronic homelessness and like coalition building among our faith community members. And it's been pretty like, that's our work and that's our lane, and we stay in our lane, and we, and I think that what this has done is be like, I think our lane is a lot bigger than maybe we thought that it was. And the work that we do, particularly with all of it, with homelessness and with like the social justice and peace work that's been happening on the interfaith relations side, there's some like very cool, very radical, like racial justice work and reconciliation with, tribal neighbors in our area, work that's happening among like predominantly white faith communities who have, been part of a historical reality that has caused harm, that are like actively asking themselves, like, what can we do to acknowledge this past? What can we do to heal and grow new relationships with Squaxin Island Tribe, with other local tribal leaders and groups here in our area? And I'm like, that is something that our country desperately needs to do. And like, if telling that story through a medium like podcast or videos, or in a way that's not exploitive, in a way that actually centers the people who are most impacted, whether it's folks experiencing homelessness or, folks who have been harmed by organized mainstream religion in our country, like, whatever that looks like, that can be a story that is told for other people to look at, to know that it's possible, to know that these, if they're having those conversations in their community, that they're not alone in that and not alone in that struggle. And that's kind of like what I mean by the lane is maybe bigger than I thought, is that we can show that moving into these places of like talking about people having mental health crisis on the corner, or addiction and what the realities of the addiction crisis are, like, I don't know, like, those conversations are possible, they're happening, and it's, helping people to have a different perspective. And so that could be like modeled other places, or I don't know, inspire other people to do the same thing.
Thinking back, there's been some really powerful conversations that have brought people to tears in sharing and bearing their soul and their experience. How has that affected you? How has that changed you, being in that emotional space with our community members?
It's made me like super grateful that, I don't know, just that there are so many people in our community who have been through like really intense things and are like at a place of so much personal healing that they can share those things publicly. And I'm like, that's freaking beautiful, because there's so much hurt and pain, and we know that, and we see it every day. But to have been able to work through some of those traumas to the point of being able to like share it with someone else in front of a camera, in front of a microphone, like, that's really cool. And that gives me like a lot of hope. I think that like gratitude is a huge piece of that. And just also remembering how much everybody is going through all the time. And again, like going back to that, the moment that you see for somebody is only like one tiny blip on the trajectory of their entire life. And they had this whole life before whatever it is that you're seeing, and they're going to have this whole life after whatever it is that you're seeing. And so it helps to keep perspective, I think, and context really at the forefront. And that, for me at least, allows me to withhold maybe judgments or biases that I might be holding, or at least be able to recognize them in myself. The other thing I want to call out with this is that I really appreciate the way that Corey interviews everybody, and that we kind of both have our like through lines of, something we bring to every interview that we do. But for Corey's interviews, he's always looking at like, what belief system got you to where you are today? And that always really helps me remember of like, what is my belief system that got me to where I am today? What are those, again, like anchors that allow me to do the work that I do in myself and in my community, and to try to reconnect to those things as regularly as possible. So it's really fun to watch Corey's interviews too. I like feel kind of nerdy, but I watch this show also. Like I host it, but then I also always watch Corey's, and that is really cool. And I watch back on ones that I've done too, because there are these certain moments that I'm like, I don't want to forget that. You know?
I'm curious to know what's one of the ways that you've observed. I know Corey's not here, and it would be awesome if he was here to be able to chat and ask you both this question. But like, what ways have you observed your colleague moving along their growth, like moving along their path? What are some of the big takeaways in your observation of your co-host?
I think that we were both really uncomfortable at first, and I think Corey was kind of like, how am I going to like really do this or connect with people in this way? And then he's like, you've seen him like drop in, he like gets into his like interview mode. And that's really cool because, and I don't know what he would say about this, but I think that that's really cool because he's so often in a leadership position in all the work that he does in the community, where he's kind of having to like, again, like do that sort of self-editing maybe that I talked about, or having to be really mindful of like the way that his message is being presented, the way that he's, fostering all these different people's needs and wants. And I think that when he's able to do an interview here, it's like there's like something he's really getting out of it, to be able to say like, I'm super interested in learning this, like from a like me place. And it comes through in a way because he's always like able to really deeply connect with people right away. And I think he was like worried about it being authentic or worried about it being real. And there's never been an issue with that. He's just like rocked it every time. So
it's some leaps and bounds for Corey.
Yeah. Would you agree that you've seen us both, or like, have you seen shifts in both of us over the time?
Well, I think that, yeah, definitely. I think your confidence level, the quality of the questions that you all ask is what brings on that sort of emotional piece.
Yeah.
Like you guys it feels like you're drawing from your lived experience to build a connection, with people that you may or may not know completely. And it's beautiful to observe the beginning and where it always seems like it's like, we're going to go climb this mountain together, and then we're going to come down the mountain together.
Yeah, totally.
And that's kind of my observation with both of you. And I think the willingness to have the difficult conversations, and I like how you guys cuss on, if it's required, if it's needed to make a point, because that there's a lot of authenticity in that, and sharing that expression, I think. And as I mentioned, I kind of feel like I was a casual observer of you, and when I saw your TEDx talk, I was like, oh, this is the real deal. This is somebody in our community who's activating the difference, activating, change. And, as I reflect further on this program, I am also remembering that you guys have been rocking this show through a very tumultuous societal time, where we see the rise of more organizations addressing issues like racial injustice, inequality, classism, those types of things. I'm curious to know what you've learned about yourself, and then, being a community leader, white person.
Yeah.
and having to speak on those very difficult issues.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to learn more about your experience being a leader, but also reconciling, like amplifying
Yeah.
other voices. I'm just curious what you've learned.
Dang, I feel like I've learned so much and am learning so much every day still. I feel like it's not been easy, honestly. Like, I think there'd probably be a problem if it had been easy this whole time, or I thought that it was. It's been really like just a lot of like questions and self kind of interrogation of like, should I be where I am? Like, what privileges have I had that have like made it so that I am where I am? How am I making sure that I'm, really listening to the things that I'm receiving and like filtering through? Because this thing that's very real, especially for our staff in homeless services, is that for a lot of our folks, many of our staff, not all, but many of our staff, this is like maybe one of their first jobs that they've had, or they, a lot of their friends were able to like get unemployment during the pandemic. And like for a lot of our folks, like coming to work was the one kind of like constant thing that happened. And the job itself is really hard already, like choosing to bear witness to like intense human suffering every day for your work. That's like a lot in the best of circumstances. And then during the pandemic, there was just so much added stress, fear, chaoticness, changes. And so to like have the one, and then it's like racial uprising, and then it's like deep interrogation of all of the systems and structures that we have in place, including a lot of like what's wrong with the nonprofit industrial complex. And then it's like when the only place you go then is like your job at the nonprofit, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of resentment, there's a lot of like, what are we doing to contribute or to heal these things? And so as a white person directing an organization that is like in some ways a over 40-year-old organization, and in other ways a like 8-year-old organization from when our homeless services program started to grow so exponentially 8 years ago. It's like, it was a lot to like filter through of where is my area of influence that I not only have the power to change things, but I have the responsibility to change things. And so there was just a lot of like filtering through those things and trying really hard to set aside defensiveness and to set aside ego, when there was really like real and legitimate and valid criticism coming my way and coming our way. And then when to be able to have confidence and not just like shrink away. I think a lot of white people during that time were like, well, then fine, I guess I'll just go away, like this sort of thing. And it's like, well, no, not that either. Like, Don't just like hide, and like what a privilege it is to shrink away at a time like that and a time like we're in. And so I think the one thing that I've been super grateful for is my addiction recovery. So I've shared it on the show before, but I had to go through a time of like intense self-interrogation when I was newly coming out of some really long-term struggles with addiction from drugs and alcohol. And that whole time was like, shut up listen to what people are saying to you, believe them when they're saying it. No, don't talk. Shh, don't talk. Shh, don't talk. Shh, don't talk. Like having those reactions of like, no, but like excuse after excuse after excuse. And I just really at that time like practiced like being able to hear the way that my behavior had been actually impacting the people that I cared most about in my life. And so I drew upon a lot of those skills over the last 2 years that I gained at that time. And so I'm grateful for that, because I think that if it had felt like having to do that for the first time, I would have screwed a lot more things up maybe than I have. But
it just makes me think of like in this process, in the development of this program, you've expressed a lot of ways that you've changed. Were there any blinders that you figured out you had in the midst of the program that you were just like, oh my gosh, I gotta, figure out a different way to do this. I gotta figure out a different way to show up. Were there any big aha, I found some blinders moment for you?
Yeah, I think that one thing that immediately comes to mind, I don't know if you remember this episode, but I had these 3 like amazing elders on, Selena, Thelma, and Lonnie. And they were, and that was like, I want to say that was like spring, like late winter or spring 2021. So it was like about a year into the pandemic. I could be getting that wrong, but that's kind of where I remember myself being at that time. And just listening to them, I think I had a lot of, at that moment, was like really exhausted from the pandemic, really kind of like hopeless. Things are only getting worse, like that kind of stuff. And being able to have the perspective of like these amazing women who had gone through so much in their 70s, 60s, 70s now, like just being able to listen to why they keep talking about things, why they keep showing up, why they keep like telling their history of where they came from and why it's important to do that. And I think the 2 sort of blinder things that I had at that moment was just like how as progressive like movements, we aren't very good at intergenerational solidarity. And so that was like, what am I doing that's not really promoting intergenerational solidarity? That was a moment. And then also I think a lot of white people, I hope at least, have been reflecting on this of like, where do I come from? And like, what is my culture? And like, who are my ancestors? And how do I draw upon that history to be able to help me go on? And I think a lot of white people are scared of that. And I know I have been like, oh, I don't really know where I come from, but it's like, no, like what is the food that I eat in my culture? Like, what is the way that I like mourn my dead? Like, how do we connect to those like underwater rivers that, I don't know, that like allow us to be able to have the strength to carry on? And so that was one that really stuck out to me.
I've always wanted to ask you this question, and I'm curious to know because it's defined. We walk in the world with confidence. We walk and we do our things. As you define yourself, who is Meg Martin?
Oh, God. Oh, no. The one question. Speechless.
How do you see yourself? I guess is really what,
You see me? I'm like so nervous that you asked that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a really, I have been like asking myself that question a lot lately, to be real. Because I think that being in a position of leadership or being in a position of like being out in the public a lot, it's hard not to just identify myself as the work that I do. And I've been really trying to like challenge myself on that. And so I am someone who is creative. I'm a musician. I'm somebody who like tries really hard to show up for my friends and for my family. I'm an auntie. I have 5 amazing nieces and nephews, and then I now have like a dozen more of friends that have had kids. And
I have to interject.
Yeah.
I thought that was like a new way to say anti-fascist.
Oh.
And I was like, how did I miss that?
I'm anti. I'm anti. I am also that. Yeah. No, but just like, yeah, I love kids and I love dogs and I love music and art and I love laughing and I love nature. And I've been not as much in nature in the last many years that I want to be. And I think a big challenge, especially with the pandemic and just like being in the executive director position, is that I don't get to be at the shelter as much. And so the moments that I do get to be, you know, in the streets or in the shelter, I'm like, oh, there she is. Like, just like being able to be in community with all different kinds of people, I'm like, that's where I shine. Yeah.
Well, to create a little bit of levity
Yeah.
within that seriousness, in the spirit of understanding who Meg Martin is, I'm going to ask you a bunch of like really quick questions, right?
Okay.
And they're going to be, I want you to go with your first impulse
Okay.
in answering these questions, because that is essentially where the heart lies.
Okay.
So, Meg Martin, what's your favorite color?
Blue.
Why?
Ocean. The ocean.
Who's the most influential person in your life?
Ever or today?
Both.
My dad.
Mm-hmm.
And my cousin Brock.
Just like briefly.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. My dad, because I feel like he has shaped me into who I am more than probably anyone. He's like, there's a million things I could say about my dad, but I think one of the things that I've really respected as of lately is that a lot of people get more conservative as they age. And I feel like my dad has only expanded his worldview with every passing minute, and has been an example of somebody who's made choices at certain times in his life that he wished he hadn't made, and has shifted those perspectives and been open and honest about it. And so that's been really a huge part of why I am who I am. And then my cousin Brock, because, he died 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, and he and I were like brother and sister growing up. And he is somebody who has just always like made me laugh more than anyone, and has been like this ray of light even through some of the most intense struggle that I've ever seen anyone go through.
What's your main instrument?
Guitar.
What was your favorite song when you were a teenager?
Ooh. That's a really good question.
Top 3.
Okay, well, how about I give you the first 3 CDs I ever owned? Okay. Nirvana, Nevermind, Grateful Dead, Skeletons in the Closet, and the Weezer Blue Album. Those were my first 3 CDs.
The last movie that you cried at?
It was like probably like a rom-com, honestly. No, for real. Or like literally like you know what? It was probably a Queer Eye show. I cry at any of the like home improve, like move that bus. Like I just am sobbing, crying.
You have pets, right?
I have one, yeah.
Tell me about your pet.
Frankie, tiny little Chihuahua Papillon mix. He's horribly trained, entirely my fault. But I really love him.
Favorite season?
Ooh. Spring.
Last book you read?
Oh God, this is bad. Actually, it was There. Have you heard about it? That book? It's a book by a person named, I believe, Tommy Orange, and it's like a few, like 5, I think, different storyline vignettes about urban Native American folks who are in the Oakland area and it's like all their different storylines that are all converging at this big Oakland powwow. And I cried a lot reading that book. It's very good. Highly recommend.
Last stand-up comedian that you heard that made you go, oh gosh,
Chris Gethard.
Tell me about that.
Okay. Chris Gethard lives in on Long Island, but was sort of like in the DIY punk scene for a really long time. I mean, still is. But he just has been this like kind of wacky indie comedian. You would probably recognize him from different shows on Comedy Central and stuff that he's had like roles in. But he has a new hour of stand-up, and Kevin and I went and saw him in Seattle, and he totally crushed. And he also is on this documentary about this water park I think in Long Island, I forget, but that is this like wild place that kids went completely insane and whatever in the 90s, but it's really good.
Last vacation that you went on?
To see my friends in New Orleans for Mardi Gras. I go every year.
Fastest you've ever been in a car?
Like, how fast have we ever been?
Fastest you've ever been in a car?
Ooh, that's probably with my dad. And I would say it was like in the 90, 100 range. Is that not fast? Is that?
I mean, it's okay.
You're like, it's not that fast. It might be, he's probably like listening and like, it was way faster than that. We were like, way faster.
Favorite meal to prepare?
Spaghetti.
Where did you get the recipe? Where's the recipe?
Well, spaghetti has always been my favorite food. My grandpa, shout out Papa Jack, he named me the spaghetti queen as a child. And so, Kevin, my partner, he started making really good marinara that was based on our friend Maddie Jo Canino's mom, Kathy Canino's gravy. That's what she calls the marinara. And so he had it on tour because they were in a band together. And Kathy would always make them lentils and gravy and marinara, or, AKA marinara. And so he adopted a recipe based on that. And now we make it that way. Shout out Kathy Canino.
Shout out. 2022 is about halfway over. What is something that you're hoping to learn in the next 6 months?
How to rest. How to take a rest. And I'm starting on Friday. I'm taking a vacation, but I'm just staying here. And usually when I take vacation, I like go do something wild or go see a million people and so I'm just going to stay home for a week because I'm trying to slow down.
Are there any questions that you've always wanted to ask me?
Yeah, actually, what is your end game?
End game?
Like with all this, I'm like, where do you see it?
My hope is that I could have somewhere between 15 to 20 healthy, happy employees. That we have multiple teams and we're able to do more traditional film work.
Like TV and movies and stuff, or
TVs,
like
commercials, more advertisements that utilize humor and sketch comedy and improv, and those are my favorite things about filmmaking. Is you can write a script, and sometimes somebody will present something, and it's wonderful. And my big focus is that here at Porcupine we're really diligent about fostering people, and it's like we've got a good amount of work that's been put before us, and so we know how to do this, and I think it's more important to nurture people to sustain a company than almost anything else. What's unique about our team is that everybody shows up with their full self.
Yeah.
We've all cried together, we've all laughed together, we've shared meals, we've had difficult conversations ourselves, and I think that would not have been possible without people being willing to show up all the way. You know? And I think the ultimate end game is I pretty much just want to do this in music in my rest of my life. The major big thing that the company has in mind is that we want to do a Super Bowl commercial. That to us would be
cool.
We would love to rest our hat on that, and we are going to continue to manifest that. And so thinking big picture, I mean, it's just we're really lucky, and Peter, Logan, Jason, Martino, newest member of the team, is phenomenal. Jessica's always holding it down with content, and really is actually a really fun photographer, and it's been fun to see them grow in their capacity. I think I just want it to be sustainable, and definitely we're in a unique position as a BIPOC-owned film company. Yeah. And commercial film production company is just, they don't really exist. Yeah. Right? Because it is, a trade that's dominated by white men, Yeah. And so it's very beautiful that we not only get to bring our culture to our work, but we also get to bring our language to our work. So it's a long-winded answer. No,
that's awesome. I feel like when you were talking, I'm like, oh, it does feel like the crew is all part of the show. I feel like what is it called? Breaking the fourth wall or whatever, where there's been times where we're like, right, Peter? Hey, and it all feels like such a close thing. It's really cool.
I definitely think so, because it's there have been times where it's when we were at the shelter and we were chatting with your guests, when that gentleman made that joke. I mean, I couldn't hold in my laughter. So, yeah. What else, Meg?
Okay, well, I think I was like, are you ever gonna be a movie star? What about your thespian aspirations?
I think what's great is like I would spend a lot of time on stage, playing music and acting and performing, and I don't envision not doing that in some capacity. But one of the things that I love about this company is I like bringing more people into the fold, like more people into, just like I want you to get hugged by all these people because they really care.
Yeah.
I'm playing drums right now in a group called Waking Bear, and so that's been, new for me during the pandemic. I picked up drumming again. So I was awesome. Here almost every night practicing, after work, just to feel confident again and playing with, different tracks and that kind of thing. But I'm a multi-instrumentalist. Like I love playing guitar. I love singing.
You're so good at singing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you rip as a musician.
Yeah, and I want to be able to, I would love to have something that I can leave for my kids to develop and be, and we definitely need more women in this craft. So that, I have 3 daughters, and I hope that in some capacity, my oldest one, she's a phenomenal actor, great singer, multi-instrumentalist at 15.
So cool.
And shout out to my big baby. She turned 15 this year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
So, I'm not satisfied with just like one expressive avenue.
Yeah.
I want to feel the breadth of the art realm,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for, just like bringing so much life into the arts. I feel like that's always such a big part of Olympia in so many ways, but I feel like you've carved out a really cool and like unique and beautiful community expression of art and music. Is awesome.
Thank you.
Inspiring. Yes.
You got me for a few more minutes. What other questions do you have?
What guests would you think would be really cool for Lean in Olympia?
Dead or alive?
Ooh, dead.
Dead. I think Salvador Dali would be a treat. He's just like,
That would be cool.
My brain automatically goes to like the worst people.
Just like help us understand what happened there.
It's a Pol Pot. Listen,
Yeah.
I just want. I don't know. I think that I think a great guest would probably be like. My mind always goes towards entertainment. But I think somebody like Maya Angelou.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Would just like.
We're all just like.
Yeah. Then I'm like, I think of like comedians. I think of. I think why I love comedy so much. It's just so real. Like the best jokes are real. Like there was a book written called Truth in Comedy. The way that you thrive as an improviser is don't make shit up. Like lead with an authentic experience.
Yeah.
And it's easier to let that idea live.
Yeah.
And it's also taught me a lot about the concept of yes and, right? So that really drives the way that I think. When somebody tells me something's not possible, I go, why can't we talk about it if it is possible? How then does that inform how we make it possible?
Yeah, totally.
Because no is like, and no is good, no's boundaries and all that kind of stuff, but I think in the creative realm, we've never been served by nope. It's like, how do we make that happen?
Yeah.
And that's where my brain lives and wants to thrive. Yeah. It's like, how do we take things that people think can't be done? I mean, I think back of like our Cinco de Mayo event here. You know, I spent the whole day on the grill. You know,
Yeah.
it was pouring down rain, but everybody was here
Right.
celebrating, just making a stand for our culture. And even though Cinco de Mayo really isn't that significant to Mexican culture, in American culture, it's something. It's a commercial holiday.
Yeah.
And so, why then should we not throw something and be in control of that perception?
Yeah, totally.
When we had the folks from Shelton, Jesus Echeverria, riding in full, he had a full Mexican dancing horse in the
so
middle of the
cool.
street in full charro outfit. And he was dancing it around. And the most beautiful moment, he was carrying the Mexican flag, but then he had the American flag.
Mm-hmm.
And he's dancing around on his horse in the middle of the street. There's a full mariachi band.
Yeah.
Over here, we've got food. We've got, the whole thing. It was our second annual South Sound BIPOC event that we hosted. And the beauty, I mean, it was just like so, like, epic.
Yeah.
To see how Mexican American culture be represented the way that we want to represent it.
Yeah.
Because we live this duality. It's like white people are just white people in America, right?
Yeah.
It's because they forgot where they came from,
Yeah.
right? And we've always known,
Yeah.
We've always known where we come from. And I think it's just knowing where you come from is really going to inform where you're going.
Yeah.
And
that's so cool. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, I don't, as a creative, I don't necessarily think I have to ask permission to be one.
Yeah.
I don't, and most don't. They just do.
Yeah.
I get inspired by Banksy,
Yeah.
for sure. What else, Meg?
Oh my gosh. Well, what do you have coming up? What are some things you want the community to know that are going to be happening?
Well, we're gonna continue NyQuil sessions starting in September, so that'll be season 3, and we do music and comedy, and we've already had a lot of inquiries about that in the fall. The reason that we don't do it in the summer is because everybody wants to be outside, and the light is kind of our enemy.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have a lot of really cool commercial projects coming up, and we're finishing up on a commercial for DCYF and JR about certified peer counselors, and it was really beautiful for us to be able to cast a lot of people of color.
Yeah.
And have folks be represented in.
Is that the commercial that your casting call was for?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So it was beautiful to see these beautiful young faces of color stepping into acting for screen, and it was powerful. It was powerful, and I hope it inspires them to pursue this craft, because a lot of them were like, oh. I was like, wow, okay, this is your first time doing this?
That's awesome.
And it was beautiful, and it taught me a lot. And, big shout out to them for choosing to work with us. And we're excited to do more. And it's going to be a commercial that's going to be shown all over the state of Washington.
That's so awesome. What is JR? Because DCYF
Juvenile, Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and / juvenile rehabilitation.
Okay, cool.
So they're really looking to find folks with lived experiences that can be trained as certified peer counselors. And this commercial is really, it's going to be seen all over the state of Washington. And if you see it, give us some feedback, send us some love and stuff like that, because, I say co-founder of this company, and I owe a lot of credit to our creative director, Logan. I love the contrast of our relationship. We're talking about what'd you say about generational?
Intergenerational solidarity, maybe is what I said. Yeah.
Well, I think it's beautiful that Logan is younger than me.
Yeah.
He's in his 20s. I'm, getting towards the end of my 30s. And I've learned so much about how he sees the world and how he shows up in the world.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to like share what I've learned and then, you know, have this great company. And, you know, I will never take credit for this place being awesome because it is the team.
Yeah.
It is the team.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, the prickle. That's a group of porcupine if you didn't know. But, that's kind of what we have coming up. We've got a few other bigger projects that we can't talk about. NDAs.
Cool. What other places would people see Porcupine and maybe not know that they're seeing it? Like Olympia Furniture
all day, baby.
Company commercials, yep. I feel like are a big one.
Mm-hmm. We have a new podcast that we're producing for a local nonprofit called Together. So we're looking forward to that.
Shout out Together. We love you.
We may be revamping a program with the YMCA.
Oh, cool.
So I don't know if y'all remember Zero Apologies, Dropping Truths.
Yeah.
There's a lot of systemic changes that have been happening at the South Sound YMCA, in which I sit on the board. I'm a board trustee, and
awesome.
We just had our board summit, and I am very proud to say that the South Sound YMCA is a leader in like governance change. So they just went to this conference, and they were like one of the few board members that was at this big conference in National Y in San Francisco. And they got to talk about the social justice work that they're doing. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
The example that this YMCA is setting for the nation.
Yeah.
On taking up the necessary work, intercultural foundations type work, DEI work, centering Blackness in those spaces. And like the great Sarah Lloyd says, once you center Blackness, you can then tend to the rest of the world's issues. And
shout out Dr. Lloyd. Corey had Dr. Lloyd on as a Lean In Olympia guest a while back, and that's one of our best episodes.
Yeah. And a dear friend, and I've had just another person that I've had the opportunity to share space and learn from and grow with, and someone that's also like making me see my own blinders. And
for
so,
sure.
you know, as you know, like accountability really drives that change to happen faster.
Yeah.
So, it's been quite the ride, and I just want to say thank you for letting us, you know, be in the car, be in the Interfaith Works car. It's probably a Nissan Leaf like Peter drives.
Yeah. You know? Thank you so much. It's been really cool, and I'm excited to see where we go from here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see what the rest of the year holds for you all, and you know, also a big shout out to Corey. I know you're not here, and I hope you're shredding like you do, and you know, just thank you, and thank you to Interfaith Works for all the work that they do in our community.
Oh, thanks, Miguel.
2828 Martin Way wouldn't happen without Meg Martin.
Oh, no. Well, when you were saying that you're like nothing without your team, and it's so real. Everyone at Interfaith Works, everyone who's a part of what we do, it's like there is no Interfaith Works without the team. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me on here, Meg.
Thank you. And thanks for all of you watching. And feel free to follow us on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Spotify now, too, for the podcast. So this has been really fun. Yeah. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for leaning in with me.
Yeah. Hey. Bye.
Adios.